For most of this season, it's felt like the entire football world has been watching Tottenham like a car crash that you can't look away from.
Short to Kobe Mainu, turns it around the corner to Brian and Mbeumo!
Every week, people tune in expecting something to go wrong. And more often than not, something does.
Oh, and it's headed in by Forest.
Now, Spurs are very close to the relegation zone. At one point, they hadn't won a single Premier League game since the start of 2026. And suddenly, something that once felt impossible was starting to feel very real. Tottenham Hotspur could actually go down for the first time since 1977. I guess you could tell that the panic had already started to kick in when the club brought in Igor Tudor as head coach. This was a move that you only make when you genuinely think your club will go down, like your local hooker. Tudor had built a reputation on stepping into difficult situations and trying to fix them fast. He had saved Udinese from relegation twice in Serie A, and when he moved to Marseille and Juventus, he came in, stabilized things, and still managed to secure Champions League football both times. The Athletic described him as a premium alternative to the likes of Tony Pulis and Sam Allardyce. But he has not been able to do anything. In fact, Spurs have gone worse. This isn't just a bad season anymore. The club is staring at the very real possibility of relegation. Financially, a club like Tottenham just isn't supposed to be anywhere near this situation. We're talking about one of the richest clubs in the world, 9th actually according to Deloitte, bringing in over 670 million euros in revenue. Teams at that level just don't get relegated. You just never see it happen. The idea of Tottenham playing Champions League football and Championship football in the same calendar year just sounds ridiculous. It's something that you would see in my Football Manager save, not in real life. But that's the position they've put themselves in. If they go down, it would be as shocking as my ex trying to go down. It would be something that we've never really seen before in the modern era. If you look back at recent history, there's not really a clear comparison to what's happening to Tottenham right now. Take Leeds United in 2004. On the surface, it looks similar, a big club falling apart quickly. But when you dig deeper, it's a completely different story. Leeds collapsed because of reckless spending. Under Peter Ridsdale, they gambled everything on staying at the top. And when the results dropped, the whole thing fell apart. Players had to be sold, finances were a mess. Tottenham are not in that position at all. In fact, it's the polar opposite. Spurs are financially stable. It's like the one thing they've had going for themselves in the past few years. If anything, they've even admitted they might need to spend more on wages just to stay competitive. A closer comparison might be Newcastle in 2009. That team had no business being relegated, but everything just unraveled. Their form in the second half of the season was terrible. There were red cards everywhere, including 3 in their last 4 games. These guys were moving like Chelsea. Their team just didn't look like they had any fight. The players lost their heads instead of stepping up. It felt like a group that had just given up, even though clearly the talent was still there. And that's where things start to feel uncomfortably similar to Tottenham. Because when people look at the Spurs team, one of the biggest criticisms is that the players are just not taking enough responsibility. There's a feeling that too many of the players are focused on themselves and not the team as a whole. According to The Athletic, one executive even described it as players constantly shrugging and pointing finger, like no one wants to take the blame. It starts to look less like a top-level squad and more like a group that's just lost direction. You can see it in the dressing room as well. There are reports from The Athletic that some key players already want out, which is never a good sign when your team is in a relegation battle. Then you've got situations like Conor Gallagher, who came in and suddenly became one of the highest paid players at the club. That kind of move, according to reports from The Athletic, created tension. Other players started looking around thinking, wait, why is this guy earning more than me when he just got here? And once that kind of doubt creeps in, it spreads like gonorrhea. But the bigger picture is what makes the situation so strange. Tottenham are not in this position because of one bad decision. It's been something that has been building up. Tottenham have turned themselves into a financial powerhouse. Their stadium is one of the best in Europe, bringing in huge money not just from football, but from concerts, hand egg, and other events. Their training ground is also top class. The club as a business has been thriving, and yet on the pitch, none of that seems to matter. Because when you actually watch them play, the biggest issue is so obvious. There is no clear identity, no real idea of how they want to play, with or without the ball.
Still felt like, Tottenham as a club was saying we're one of the big boys. And the reality is I don't think they are, in terms of my experience over the last 2 years.
In modern football, having an identity is everything. You look at Brentford under Thomas Frank. They didn't have the biggest stars at the time, yet they knew exactly what they were. Unfortunately, that never translated over when Thomas Frank joined Spurs. In fact, you still don't see an identity even with Tudor. And when you combine that lack of identity with poor form, tension in the dressing room, and pressure building every week, you start to understand how a club this big could actually fall into something as unthinkable as relegation. If Tottenham actually go down, the reality is that this squad won't stay together. They will get torn apart. Most of these players are either in their prime or entering it, and they're not going to spend a year in the championship if they have other options. And the truth is, many of these guys, despite their poor attitude, do have plenty of options. The defense would probably be the first area to go, because despite their performances, many top clubs would be interested in the players they have. We're talking about guys like Vicario, Pedro Porro, Udogie, Mickey van de Ven, and Christian Romero. All internationals, all players who, despite the season, can play at a very high level. There's just no realistic way these guys stay. On top of that, players like Danso and Jed Spence would definitely attract interest too, whether that's permanent moves or loans back to top flight teams. Then you move into midfield and it's a similar story. Gallagher only just arrived and he had Premier League interests before choosing Spurs. He's not going to want to drop down a division. Then Bentancur is another one. He's committed to the club long term, but that was with the expectation of them competing at the highest level. If Spurs go down, that situation changes quickly, especially coming off a season where he was so important when he was fit. And up front, it's very obvious that Spurs would get picked apart. It's really hard to imagine players like Dominic Solanke, Mohamed Kudus, James Maddison, Kulusevski, Xavi Simons, or Richarlison staying. These are players in their peak years. Players who expect to be playing in big games, in big competition. The championship doesn't match that level. So if relegation did happen, it wouldn't just be about going into a lower league. It would mean losing the core of the squad almost overnight. And once that happens, you're not just trying to get promoted again, you're basically starting from scratch like a road to glory. If relegation is the nightmare scenario, there is one silver lining. It's that it would force Tottenham to lean into their youth players. And for some players, that could actually be the best thing that happens to their careers. Look at Wilson Odobert. His situation changes completely because of his ACL injury. He's not going anywhere right away, but that might actually work in his favor. Before the injury, he was starting to find real form, especially during a stretch in January and February of 2026, when he stepped up on the right wing. If Spurs do go down, the championship would be the perfect environment for him to rebuild himself. Less pressure, more minutes, and a chance to become one of the standout attackers in the league while he gets his confidence back. That also opens the door for a really exciting partnership with Mikey Moore. He's already been showing signs of growth out on loan at Rangers, and after a slow start, he's really picked things up. If he comes back to a relegated Spurs side, he's not going to be a prospect anymore. He's going to be someone who can play regularly and develop properly. That kind of consistent game time is not something that he would get right away in the Premier League. Then you've got players like Archie Gray and Lucas Berival. They're both talented players, but they're still developing. In the Premier League, minutes can be limited and any sort of mistake gets punished quickly. In the Championship, they would be starting weekly. That's huge for their development. It's the kind of season where they can grow into leaders and not just be rotation options off the bench. The same goes for the goalkeeping situation. Kinski could step up into a starting role and actually develop through real experience. And boy, does that poor guy need his confidence back. And maybe the biggest shift would come from the academy. Relegation would force Tottenham to give real opportunities to young players who might otherwise be stuck waiting. Guys like Luca Williams-Barnett, Junai Byfield, and Tynan Thompson could suddenly become part of the first team picture. Even someone like Souza, who just arrived from Santos, could benefit from being eased into English football at a slightly lower level before stepping up. And then there's Luka Vuskovic. At just 18 years old, he's already being talked about as one of the most exciting young center backs in Europe. If Spurs go down, there will be serious interest in him, no doubt. But if he somehow stayed for a season in the Championship, it could help him adjust to the physical side of English football before making that jump to the Premier League. I doubt a player as talented as him would want to wait, but long term, that might be exactly what he needs. So while relegation would absolutely be disaster in almost every single way, for some of these young players, it might be the best opportunity of their lives. It would give them something they wouldn't normally get at a club like Tottenham, which is responsibility right away, lots of minutes, and a real chance to grow into the future of the team. If Tottenham actually went down, it wouldn't completely destroy the club, but it would hurt them really bad financially. The first thing to understand is that we've never really seen something like this before. A club this rich, this big, just doesn't get relegated. Spurs are the 9th wealthiest team in the world, bringing over 670 million euros a year. No club in the Premier League era has ever made that kind of money and still gone down. So in a lot of ways, This is completely new territory. Now the good news for Tottenham is that they're not run like a reckless club. Their wage bill, while still huge, is more controlled compared to their rivals. And if they do get relegated, a lot of their highest paid players would likely leave anyways. They would either be sold or loaned out. That would help ease the pressure a bit financially, even if that means weakening the squad. But here's where the real damage comes in: revenue. The Premier League is where the money is. The TV deals alone are massive, literally worth billions. Once you drop into the Championship, that money falls off a cliff. The EFL TV deal is nowhere near the same level, so Spurs would instantly lose a chunk of income from broadcasting, match days, and sponsorships. Even for a club as big as Tottenham, that's a big hit. That said, Spurs do have something that most clubs don't: their stadium. It's not just a football ground, it's basically a business hub. Hand-egg games, concerts, boxing events, all of that still brings in money regardless of what league they're in. So while relegation would definitely hurt their football income, they would still have strong revenue streams off the pitch, keeping things stable. So financially, it wouldn't be a total collapse like what happened with Leeds in 2004, but it would set them back a lot. If Tottenham bounce straight back up, they can limit the damage. One season in the Championship, you reset, you rebuild, and you go again. But if they don't, that's when things will start to spiral. Lower revenue, weaker squad, harder to attract players, and suddenly getting back becomes much more difficult. The other thing that would take a big hit is their sponsorship money. Not because Tottenham are a small club, but because the exposure in the Championship is just far less. Right now, Spurs are playing in the most watched league in the world. The Premier League gives sponsors global visibility, millions, even billions of eyes every week. Drop into the Championship, and that audience shrinks faster than my balls in cold weather. And for sponsors, that's everything. Take their deal with AIA. It's reportedly worth around £40 million a year. So realistically, that number only makes sense when you're getting Premier League exposure. In the Championship, that value would have to be reevaluated. That deal would either have to be renegotiated or restructured completely. Tottenham probably never ever planned for this. Smaller clubs usually have relegation clauses built into their sponsorship deals. Tottenham likely don't, because nobody seriously expected these guys to go down. So now everything becomes a negotiation. If they do stay with their current sponsor, it would be on reduced terms, something much closer to Championship level deals, which would be a fraction of what they're earning now. If they can't agree, Spurs might look for a short-term sponsor, maybe a one-year deal, just to get through that season, and then aim for a bigger contract if they can bounce straight back up. But here's where Tottenham's size still matters. Even in the Championship, they wouldn't just be some team there. They would be the main story and the face of the league. From a sponsor's perspective, they still have some upside. More wins, more positive headlines. Spurs wouldn't just be another team fighting for survival there, they would be the story of the league. So yes, sponsorship revenue would drop, there's no way around that, but it wouldn't disappear. Tottenham would still be an attractive brand, just one that suddenly has to operate in a much smaller spotlight. The most important thing though is that Spurs are not in this position because of one person or one decision. It's been a long journey to get to this point, and to see that journey, you have to watch this video right here.